Thanks. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. But thank you. And I also have to thank Michael Kaiser and the National Cybersecurity Alliance and Bobby Stempley, who has been here several times, and other people in the federal government that have seen what we all have done here as a model. And I can tell you, having been out and about on the road for the last couple months, that we are a really strong player in this movement, and that is, I think, what we all set out to do. Not to grab attention, but to use attention, and our resources here in San Diego are one, I like to call it the 1 degree of separation that is San Diego, to bring together stakeholders in a unified vision to move cybersecurity down the field in a way that other communities weren't doing. And what I've seen over the last 2 years has been really dramatic. Not only what's happened here in San Diego, but just the evolution of cybersecurity and education around it across the country. National Cybersecurity Month kicked off, I think it's 8th year, and I think I've sort of watched 3 of them now, and it really seems like last year and then really this year that you see a lot of community-based awareness and organization around this, unprecedented. I participated in an event. I happened to be in D.C. The day that it kicked off, which I think was about 3 weeks ago, and Michael and team were in Washtenaw, Michigan, where there's another strong program. There was activities in D.C., Arizona, Scottsdale, Colorado. I believe there's a team in Colorado today. We have, of course, what we're doing in San Diego, and so it goes, San Antonio and Omaha, Nebraska. And slowly, we are all being part of planting the seeds of this around this important issue. And I do believe it's as important as ever. I think it, in a sense, is part of the DNA that runs our society, that runs our economies. And we have to create value in our communities by making our communities more cyber safe. So we all need to continue in the work. It isn't one person. It's all of us together. And these are social issues that require a sense of social change. And I want to shift now the conversation to our panel topic of the day. And if I could invite our panelists up, and while they're coming up, I'll do just a quick introduction of them, assuming I can remember my password. Yeah, long and strong password. So we're going to talk specifically in this panel session about the international issues that face all digital citizens across the globe, and some solutions we see in implementing and addressing them. This is not a San Diego issue. This is not a United States issue. This is a global issue, and we are all part, as citizens of the global community, to do our part around cybersecurity to make that environment more secure. It is that individual and shared responsibility that we all have. And we have a number of very distinguished panelists who are going to help us in that discussion today. I'm happy to invite my friend Sebastian Bortnik. We've seen each other around the globe now a few times. He's from ESET in Argentina. And also here is Andrew Serwin from the Foley group, and Chris Hall, who I just met today for the first time. He was gracious enough to step in last minute and talk about this important issue. I kind of like to distinguish and dissect this general topic into 2 issues that I think are relatively easy for all of us to understand, and that is the notion of international cybercrime and what I would call nation-state cyber activities. If you look at the international cybercrime scene, we think of things like online banking and how financial fraud impacts our personal situations. And this is something that has been on the rise for the last so many years. Just a recent study, for example, by NCSA and Symantec showed that 40% of targeted attacks are directed at companies of 500 employees or less. This essentially mirrors what San Diego and many communities across our country and the globe are all about, small business. Small business, they need to protect their vital assets. More than 20% of those companies handle the intellectual property of other companies. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I would call the international support for cybercrime industry, and I want to challenge our panelists to talk openly in the cone of silence. Is there media here, by the way? If you are from media, can you raise your hand? Okay, there's one person from media, just so you know. And then the other side of this discussion is what I would call nation-state cyber activities, and that includes cyber warfare. Cyber warfare, which sounds daunting, doesn't necessarily mean rockets firing back and forth, but it could mean the use of cyber to disrupt the activities of other nation states. Threats against military critical infrastructure such as water, power, nuclear, and banking targets. An example of this that many of folks in this room will be aware of is the Stuxnet worm, which demonstrated a capability to bring down industrial control systems, Iranian reactor in the Iranian territory. And then the other aspect, Shady Rat, which is a global operation. Some believe it was foreign nationals, maybe Chinese, that hacked about 37 accounts across multiple large company domains, collected lots of intellectual property. And the challenge here is many times companies don't know what was taken. They just know that a breach occurred. We've seen what's happened with this new movement of hacktivism, Anonymous and LootSec, attacks on Sony, the U.S. Senate, and CIA just in the last 6 weeks. So these are active open targets and points of discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our distinguished panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves and then share a little bit about their perspective on cyber, and we'll get into an active dialogue. And I would encourage you, once these introductions and these kind of initial comments, to participate, and let's participate in a live discussion. As I like to say, and you've heard me say before, this isn't television, and we all need to participate. So, sir?
Can I show my slides now?
Yes, and actually, we do have a one-slide presentation. Is that ready to go? I can't see. Yeah, hands up.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
It's up.
Who is controlling my slides? Over there? Okay, I will make you like a sign when I need to move on, okay?
Oh, there's a clicker.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's hard to see. You can barely see like a little hand popping up with the light here. So.
Well, my name is Sebastian Bortnik. I will introduce myself briefly, but also I want to tell you how we start securing our eCity in Argentina, and I think it's the best way to introduce what's happening there. Let me try. Okay, that's not the button. That's okay. Well, briefly, I've been made like more than.
You have that also.
Where I have to.
Sebastian, you can also look down there if that helps.
No, it's okay.
See it from over there, so.
Okay, I've been made. I've been made more than 200 talks in Spanish, but that's only the amount of talks I've been given in English. This is my first minute talking in English. So please. So please forgive me if I make some linguistic mistake or I'm not expressing as best as possible. Well, briefly, I'm from Argentina. It was already told. Argentina is a small, not a small country near the end of the world. Maradona is from here and also the best meat of the world. The most important is that I work at ESET. I'm the awareness and research manager. And we have been we made a lot of awareness initiatives in Latin America for 5 years nowadays, or 6. For example, this year we are finishing with 120 talks at universities and Congress, and we are like the most responsible security company regarding awareness in the whole region of Latin America. So I want to tell a short story about how we start securing our eCity in Argentina. 1 year ago, I was here, and my boss said to me, you have to go to San Diego and to attend the Securing Our eCity event. So our Securing Our eCity is inspired on Securing Our eCity. So I came here, and I was thinking about what we can do, because we are the most responsible security awareness company, blah, blah, blah. So what we can do in Argentina? I mean, we are already doing things. So I came here. I know you. I knew Securing Our eCity. Darin and Liz spent a lot of time with me, especially Liz, telling us how they start this. And I go back to Argentina really, really excited. I mean, we share the main beliefs of this. We know that users can do things better regarding to the use of the computers. Oh, well, okay. Also, I know that security is not a problem of a single sector. I mean, we were working alone on awareness, and I saw here like how many stakeholders could get responsible of this problem. And also that education and awareness are the keys, and I love that. I mean, it's my work for 4 years. So I don't know why I'm going back with that. Okay, so, but there is a problem. Security in eCity was in America, but we have to do it in, I don't know, in Argentina. Also, the Wikipedia says that we are the first world. You know, Argentina and America are in the same color, but that's not the truth. We are the third world, and that's, I don't know where I have to. We are the third world, and we have some problems. I mean, if we can do things wrong, we do it in this way. I mean, that's the problem of our countries. You know this image? Is Maradona making a goal with his hand. So that's the problem, and I was really worried about that. I mean, how can we achieve the government, the media, in a country where people is only responsible of his company or his goals, but we need to compromise people, and I was really worried about that. But I was wrong. The results 1 year ago, before are better than I thought, so I have to confess that. What we have done, briefly, and I finish. What have we done? Well, we have a name that's important. I mean, we start promoting this as Security in eCity Argentina, but it was a problem. We need a Spanish name, so now it's Argentina Cybersecura. We also have a log, general interface, also a website based on your templates. We have made a lot of talks with childs. That's our main activity this year. We go to a lot of schools and aware childs about cyberbullying and grooming and so on. But the most important thing is what we are doing now. Okay? Well, that's our webpage. It's not important because I want to go fast. Oh, okay. What are we doing? And that's, we'll have a lot of huge projects right now. The first one, if it works, is that we are setting up as a non-profit organization. You know, as here, ESET was the father of this project, but we need more stakeholders, we need more companies, the public sector, the education sector, so to set up as a non-profit organization will help us to achieve more people. We are organizing this symposium in Argentina. We are signing a great agreement with a producer of TV, so we will create some TV commercials regarding awareness, and they, as a responsible initiative, they will show in the Argentinian TV, in Chile, and also in other countries in Latin America, and we can create the content. So our ideas will be on the TV. That's great. We are working with a small Argentinian city to create like a model of a cyber safety city, and it's great to start with a small one because Buenos Aires is huge. And also we are accompanying the government of Buenos Aires. You know, they are giving laptops to all childs in school, and when the father goes to take the laptop, we aware fathers in a 15 or 20 minutes talk. We will start in the 1st of November, and for 1.5 months, we will aware each father that receives a laptop about, okay, that's the most important thing you have to know, or your child needs to know when he receives the laptop, okay? So, finally, what we are going to do, we don't know. I mean, we have a lot of things to do, and I'm here to spy your ideas, and as last year, because there is a lot of goals we can achieve, but we have to make the decisions. Finally, I didn't tell you the whole story. When I came here last year and I talked with Darin and I talked with Liz, they told me that Security in eCity was in part inspired by our initiatives in Latin America, but our ESET awareness initiatives in Latin America. And so it's kind of strange. I mean, Argentina Cybersecura is based in Security in eCity, and Security in eCity is based in our idea. So I learned something important 1 year ago. You can always do things better. I mean, Argentina Cybersecura is so much better than our antivirus tool, and that's what I learned 1 year ago. There is an African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's the spirit of securing our eCity, and we are trying to have the same spirit. So you are not helping. You are not helping. You are helping San Diego citizens, but you are also helping other parts of the world because we are inspired in us, and you are you were very helpful to us. So keep doing that, because it's not only San Diego citizens who have to be happy of you. Also, I'm happy of you because you really help us, and we are trying to imitate you. I don't know if it's okay. So keep doing that. Keep doing that because we have a lot of work to do, and as I learned 1 year ago, things always can be better. Thank you.
Thank you. So I definitely have to confess that the Securing Our City program came largely from work that our Argentinian colleagues were doing even a year or so before. They were doing a lot of workshops, and the idea was, how do we inform people in our country and change the behavior? And that was, I think, the real spark while I was at ESET that got me thinking, and then I spoke to other folks on that team, and it was sort of out of that is we need to change behavior, and that's what this is about. Just like other social issues, whether it's drunk driving or safe sex or all those other things, it's all about what we do as individuals. And I do think that there's an Argentinian saying that a good idea has 1,000 mothers. And I think that there really isn't an original idea. It's what we're building together, and it needs to be iterated. And I was talking to Randy Fritsch this morning, and I think his notion is this is an open source model, and if we can all contribute to this open source model, we can make the model better. There's an old saying in open source that with enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. And I think that, to Sebastian's point, we can kind of ferret out the defects in the program and make it better if we work together, not only here in San Diego, but across the nation and across the globe as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you. And I'll ask the follow-on to the media question, which is, do we have anyone from the Federal Trade Commission or any of the data protection authorities, just so I know who's in the audience? I see no hands, which is fine. I have the pleasure of speaking before those guys anyway. I'm Andy Serwin. To describe what I do, I'm an author. I run a think tank, and to put it in better words than using the lawyer word, I'm a cleaner. I'm the guy you call in when there's an incident or something really bad has happened. And I'm going to want to walk through, sort of from a perspective point, how all those three things impact my views on cybersecurity. And from the authorship standpoint, I've now written a book that is coming out, its 5th edition in about a month, that's 4,600 pages of everything you ever wanted to know about data privacy and security in the U.S. and 11 other countries. And so I have a pretty good understanding of what the at least legal requirements are when you're dealing with data. And that's sort of an interesting point, but not as interesting as probably some of the other perspective, which is the think tank I run really focuses on data sensitivity. And I think that's one thing where both industry and some of the government agencies need to have a little different focus on what they're doing. To put this in context, the EU is pretty focused on a principle called accountability, meaning that there's accountability in the organizations for data security and how data is handled. But one of the interesting quirks, if you compare our system to their system, is there's much more enforcement in the United States. You're much more likely to get a Federal Trade Commission action than you are to get an enforcement action by the data protection authorities in Europe. And so there's that divide. And we can talk about legislation, but there's a real disconnect about cybersecurity at a very high level right now. And the easiest way to see that is, with the EU, everyone says the EU has much stricter laws, and you can debate that or not depending on what you look at, but most of the EU countries do not have data breach laws right now. And so, you can maybe decide that we have better laws here or not. Canada has gone a little different way, and particularly gone down a track because of one of the data protection commissioners up there talking about privacy by design. And to pick up on some of the themes earlier, that doctrine right now looks at products or services and says, how do we design privacy into that product or service? And I think that's somewhat the debate of the internet, which is, how do you take a platform that's pretty open and design privacy in at a very core level so that everyone understands what the expectations are? And I think there's a secondary piece, which is where I would say the think tank that I run really is going, which is, you can't protect and probably shouldn't protect all information in the same way. You're not going to protect extremely sensitive information at the same level you protect my name and my email address. And so where I've been trying to push the thought is to say, if we're going to use privacy by design, you need a blueprint. And we can all debate whether the EU has a different view culturally, whether the US has a different view culturally, but we've got to start with sensitivity as the basis for data security. Because if you do that, you can prioritize your resources and make better choices and understand the legal choices you're making, but also the brand issues you have. Because when I come into one of the sort of situations where I have to clean one of these things up, sometimes it's a legal issue. A lot of times it's a PR or brand issue, which is, how is this going to impact your brand? And maybe you're not legally required to do whatever it is I'm going to tell you to do, but I know that individuals will have a very bad reaction from a data security perspective if you don't take certain steps. And so I think if you look at this in a normal setting for a business, and I'm a bit of a Lean Six Sigma guy, so you'll have to bear with me on voice of the customer, you've got to understand what your customers want before you can make these choices. And again, the lawyer is going to sit here and talk not about law, which is, how do your customers, how are they going to react when you lose their name and email address? Unless it's a mega problem, meaning you lose, millions or tens of millions, they're probably not going to care the same way as if you lose their name, social, and other identifying information. And so my perspective is less as a lawyer in a lot of cases and more coming in and saying, how sensitive is this information, and where do we see differences in the international community versus approach on how to protect data, but also differences in culture based upon the sensitivity of information.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll hear from Chris Hall from Booz.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'd first of all like to thank all of the sponsors for the activities that brought us here today. I'd also like to personally thank Darin for the invitation yesterday to fill in on this panel. But in all seriousness, the global perspective is something that we need to take very seriously. And so let me just briefly share a little bit of my own history. I'm a political science economics major and undergraduate. And then I started working for 10 years around state and local governments, around adopting and applying technical solutions, mainly into education institutions, primarily K through 12 and higher ed, as a IBM value-added reseller. After that experience, it was very clear that information assurance and cybersecurity was going to be a critical discussion as we move forward, not only at the state and local level, but at a national level. And what I didn't fully appreciate then that I appreciate now is that international and global perspective. So I'd like to share some concepts around that. Just to continue where I came from and how I got here today, I went and then got an MBA, and so I have the business side of it around technology management, and I also have a Master's of Science in Information Assurance. So I bring together a lot of the social, political, economic, and technology aspects to my job every day. And as a private citizen, I can see those connections, and some of it is scary, but frankly, most of it is extremely exciting. And what I'd like to focus on today isn't the scary, but what is actually exciting. But first of all, I'd like to just make a statement, and that is that the benefits of cyber will not be fully realized or the threats and vulnerabilities reduced without a cooperative, comprehensive approach to cyber at the international, national, and local level. And that really is a theme of what we're here today to discuss. I think that the group, the organizations, the community that's been brought together today exemplifies how to operate at that local level. But at the same time, we must have an international perspective. We cannot afford to look at this as my community or my city or my company exclusively. And so having this dialogue is extremely important. What I'd like to say is that there are waves of creative destruction. And I did not come up with that term. There are all kinds of sociologists and PhDs in economics that have studied this. But they're almost always exclusively driven by technology innovation. You can go back 2,000 years and find technology and the evolution of technology on a global scale impacting humanity. There wasn't too long ago that we used to say there's going to be 1 billion people on this planet, and how can we sustain it? As of last week, I think we're close to 7 billion. Technology and our innovation is a critical enabler to doing that. Cybersecurity is one of those pillars. So around that kind of creative destruction, waves of technological innovation, what is it that we need to do? We need to first recognize that we are in a cyber age. That cyberspace is just one way that we are engaging in that cyber age. There are all sorts of social, economic, political issues that create that. And the United States as a country must recognize its influence and its responsibility around cyber power. So what I'd really enjoy is a discussion around that. I don't want to take up too much more time because I know that we have till the top of the hour, and I think engaging you as the audience would be far more important. But that's kind of the theme of why I'm sitting up here today.
Thank you, Christopher. It's Christopher, not Chris, too. He's part of many Chris's at the Booz family, and reminded me that he goes by Christopher, so I apologize for the oversight. We have a microphone or two. Okay, so we have 2 microphones in the back, and I want to open it up immediately to audience questions, and there's one here, or are you telling me I need to speak louder? Okay, you have a question. Yeah, there's a question down here. There's just like a white aura around you. Oh, thank you.
How much better
I'm blushing.
That? All you guys, I'm so impressed with all of the topics that you cover. I think just a little bit more maybe targeted toward, is it Andy?
Yes.
I do a lot of research and analysis on the breaches that are happening, and those anonymous and those that Darin was mentioning earlier. Unfortunately, we have a very, very vulnerable piece of personal information in the United States that was never designed to be an identifier, as opposed to some of the European countries, which their numbers are a little bit more, they identify you a little bit more than ours do. So when it comes to protecting information or possibly getting rid of those pieces of information or modifying those pieces of information, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would probably change your question just a little bit, which is, I think the SSN, which is what we're talking about, was always meant to be an identifier. And that's not a problem, because knowing that I'm the Andy Serwin that lives here isn't as much of an issue as it is that it's also an authenticator. And I think that's really the core issue we deal with in this country. And I think there's a different view. I think our credit rules are much looser in the United States. You can debate whether that's good or bad. For those of you who say you don't like it, you can go put a credit freeze on right now and basically make it so that no one can access your credit report, but you then can't walk into Best Buy and get consumer credit quickly. I think the system here has made some choices about the ease of availability of consumer credit that require identifiers. I think the challenge is it never should have been an authenticator, and I think the companies that use it both ways run a lot of risks. And that's the lawyer answer, and I'll give you the PR answer too, which is the problem is if you don't use it as an authenticator, you have to collect more sensitive PII to authenticate somebody, and then you get pushback too. So I wish I could tell you there's a great answer to it. I think the issue is you need to limit socials as much as you can to try and keep that under control, but know that then your customers may get a little upset with you when you say, well, I need your mother's maiden name, the street you grew up on, and your pet's first name to authenticate you. And I think it's gotten very easy to use it as an authenticator when it probably wasn't meant to be.
I love that notion of the lawyer and the PR.
Yeah.
It's like, I wanted to ask a question, and maybe, Sebastian, you can answer this. Do you see any differences? Can you kind of categorize countries or region of the world about how they're addressing these issues? Because, you have different countries, obviously, that have different sort of socioeconomic positions, are in different stages of development. I think of Africa and Latin America versus, more developed areas of the world. And how do we bring this issue, which is really everyone's responsibility, when there are kind of real in-home or in-country issues that each country faces from a cyber perspective?
Okay, first of all, we see this difference between developed countries and not developed countries also in the threats. I don't know, for example, banking Trojans, that specifically malware that it's my best knowledge. Banking Trojans were...
And that's Trojans, right? Like a piece of malware that does a certain thing.
Yeah, banking Trojans were pretty popular like 5 or 10 years ago. But nowadays, they are like disappearing in the rest of the world. But in Latin America, we are still seeing them in huge amounts. Why it's happening? Because our online systems are not as secure as the rest of the world. So we look where we see in Latin America that a lot of threats that are disappearing are still the most important in our region. So we have to adapt our awareness to our threats. And the second part is what's happened with other problems that we are facing, how we can talk about cybersecurity when we have maybe bigger problems. I think that I mean nowadays all of the people is working with computers. I mean, not only developed countries. For example, as I told you, nowadays the government is giving laptops to all of the children that are going to school in Argentina. We have like the most rich boys and the poorest boys. So we have to learn all of them, and our most difficult goal is the first step, that they understand that it's important. I mean, when I was a boy and I started to go to the street, my mother said to me, okay, be careful, do not speak with strange people. But nowadays we have to talk with people before they get the computer, and that's the most difficult goal. We have to talk with them before they start using the computer. And that's our problem. I mean, if they get the computer and we talk with them like 5 years before, after, it's late. It's too late. And we are trying to be at this moment. And that's our major difficulty.
Thank you. Were there any other comments from the other panelists on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to...
Poorly phrased questions that I made.
Sure, I'd just like to add on that and briefly say that the balance between availability and confidentiality, integrity, is something on an international level that isn't debated the same way that it is in the United States. The fact is that technology and the availability of that technology is actually creating a social, political, economic framework from which the United States needs to fully appreciate. The fact is that many of us grew up based on an infrastructure that was developed by our parents, grandparents, and really invested in by our great-grandparents. And the ability to apply the cyber infrastructure does not require nearly that amount of time. When you look at the number of people on the planet, the number of people that have access to the internet, and when I travel internationally, the number one discussion I have around technology is access, is availability. The fact is every country in one way or another and its people want to be on the internet. Look at what's going on in North Africa. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. And you don't have to go far to understand that. So I think we as a nation in that international discussion need to appreciate that availability is what's driving the world. And availability is what's going to drive innovation and creativity. And that we can't be so afraid of our own insecurities that we disable that function. Now, to the same extent, we are far more mature. And so we have a leadership responsibility working with many of our partners in Europe and around the world to create that blueprint, to create that infrastructure that meets those confidentiality and integrity requirements. But at the same time, availability is what's going to drive that the international community moving forward. That would be the only part I'd add to that.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience? I see a couple in the back there.
So, great discussion on privacy.
Sorry, could you just identify yourself? Just so they
this is Rob Ayub, Frost & Sullivan. So, great discussion around privacy, but when we talk about cybercrime, of course, one of the great problems is, when you go to stop it, is extradition, the consistency of laws internationally. How do you all, not that anyone's going to answer the problem, but how do you see any progress in this area, or how do you see that piece of it, which is pretty integral to solving some of the cybercrime problems, being addressed?
I think one of the issues is there's always going to be sort of safe havens, and I think part of it is reducing those safe havens as much as you can, whether it's, some of the banking laws that existed in the past. We went through sort of a gambling period where, you could have these sites offshore and payments still processed in the U.S. I think it's education, and I think it's offering technology and solutions for those countries that make it more palatable for them to be part of the international community than not. I think it's really a policy issue, not as much a legal issue, but you're always going to have some areas of the world that aren't going to, for whatever reason, go along with the majority of the countries.
The only thing I'd add to that is a brief analogy. This country was founded because of our ability to put people on ships and get them over here, right? We were able to circumnavigate the entire world. How long did it take us to come up with those rules, regulations, laws? How long did it take us, with very, very different social viewpoints, come up with a common operating environment where we have international law at sea? And you look at the interconnectivity that's occurring now via the internet, and think about the complexities and the depth and the integration of that communication that is occurring, and our codependency, right? Our ability to move goods and services around this world is the heart of most industrialized nations today, including the United States. The fact is, we are in one of these long wave changes. What I mean by a long wave change is that about every 60 or 70 years, there's something that fundamentally shifts where we are as through economics and technology innovation. And those long waves then drive social, economic, and political decisions. We are at a point with where we are with this technology that I don't think we fully appreciate where we are going. And we need to not just focus on the short term around the specifics of the technologies, the policies, and the people programs, but also where do we strategically want to be in cyberspace? How do we identify that strategy and then execute to that strategy? And it cannot be a U.S. strategy. It absolutely must be a global strategy. And until we appreciate that, frankly, we're just going to argue about how many angels dance in the head of the cyber pin.
Do you have a comment on that, Andrew?
No.
I wanted to just hone in on that topic a little bit, and one of my favorite questions that Michael Kaiser asked is it time for us to begin looking at these large corporations who have suffered large breaches? And by the way, we're talking about the Fortune 500 at this point, or the Global 2000, as victims of crime, and to change the way we think about them, instead of punishing through brand damage and suggesting that they were not taking good cause and good fiduciary responsibility, to support them in a different way. And I just wondered if any of the panelists had a comment on that notion.
I think there's a discussion that has to be had at some point, which is these companies are sometimes vilified, and maybe you think that's a good thing or maybe you think it's a bad thing, but they don't want breaches. Now, you can debate whether they did enough to prevent it, but information, when everyone realizes that information is an asset for these companies, the last thing they want is this information out there. And so I think there is an element to say that companies don't want this to happen for a variety of reasons. They certainly don't want their own, putting customer information aside. The last thing they want is a cyber attack that steals their core IP. And I think we need companies to try and probably treat customer data more like they treat their trade secret IP information, and then customers to realize that this is not something that companies want. And once you get there, I think you can have that discussion.
Any other comments on that? We had another question in the back near Rob there.
I just had a question. I wanted to go back to what we could do individually, and you guys had mentioned credit freeze. And one of the things that I wanted to ask is, like the Clark Howards and the Susie Armonds of the world, are they really touting that these days? And in particular, for the elderly to lock down their credit. So my question is it really lock down your credit or not? How good is it, or how good isn't it?
If you lock your credit file down, it's pretty good. I mean, you can have other forms of identity theft, and it is not a full solution. Someone still can try and commit crimes in your name, but it stops. There's really two types of identity theft. The most common is someone getting a credit card and charging on it, and our system, for better or worse, has a sort of risk shift to ultimately, through the payment card industry regulations, down to the merchants, and that's a financial issue that doesn't really impact consumers most of the time directly. There's the secondary type that is someone opening credit or doing things as me. And I think the credit freeze certainly locks down new credit being opened, which is a real problem. It is not a complete solution to someone pretending to be me and committing a crime, but it does help a lot with probably the second most common form of identity theft.
Comment?
Yeah, I think that consumers and government have a big responsibility. I mean, we know that all the systems could be better in terms of security, but the question is, you said the question before, how customers will react if you lose their information. And I think maybe there is a problem. I mean, how we react. Maybe we don't care. When the Sony incident happened this year, we publish in our blog and we recommend people to change their credit card because it was exposed. And some people comment on the blog and say, "Oh, it's too paranoid." It's not paranoid. I mean, if you lose your credit card in the street, you will change it. But if someone loses it in the internet, you don't mind. So if you start demanding security, maybe companies will react, but we are responsible too. I mean, to demand it.
And I think one of the studies I've done is on the demographics of privacy, and it looked at who, by sort of age and a variety of other factors, says they care about privacy, and then who actually does care. Because what you can see is, if you take the FTC's suggestions for consumers on what they should do to protect their identity, 35% of the people still carry their Social Security card in their wallet. And as bad as you want to say some of the companies are out there with these data practices, that's a way worse practice than most of what I see come across my desk. And so I think the consumers, it's not to put it all back on the consumer, but there's a joint role to protect information, and I think the consumers don't always really understand, and I think that's the role, obviously, of what we're doing here today, is trying to get the consumers to understand their role in this process.
So along those lines, very quickly picking up on that theme, I had a privilege of working on an Australian public key infrastructure, PKI project. And the Australians were going through just enormous healthcare costs increases. Does that sound somewhat familiar? And one of the challenges that they were having was they wanted to utilize technology in order to take advantage of doing things far more effectively and efficiently. But what they quickly ran into was the crux of a problem was identity and access management. The fact is that our social fabric, understandably, and because we have a history of this that's well-deserved, is not exactly trusting of authoritative figures, right? And a lot of that distrust has created all kinds of innovation and helped us lead the world. But at the same time, around the ideas of generations and looking at, ages of our population and what they see as their own personal information and how much they're willing to share that. We need to have a national debate on this issue, because in Australia what they're able to do is essentially create a smart card identity for everyone, and if you wanted to be on the dole, right, down in Australia, or if you wanted to take care of federal benefits, you had to first establish your identity physically and in a cyber world. And until or unless we're able to create those identity mechanisms in our cyber infrastructure as a nation, and then prove to the rest of the world how we're able to do that, the accountability, in my mind, is a long way off.
Thank you. We have time for just a couple more questions, but I did want to make one sort of pitch about companies and products, and that is companies and products that are engaged and involved in cybersecurity right here in our backyard. We have one of the richest sort of patches of land and technology and people that are creating solutions in this space. And I personally believe that this should be on San Diego's roadmap to make San Diego a hotbed for cyber. In some ways it already is, but we need to do a better job of sort of marketing ourselves out there. There is a solution created by a company here in town, ID Analytics, that goes to exactly what you talk about. You can lock down your credit in the sense that you can get a real-time notice when someone tries to access your credit. And I use that product myself. Look for technology solutions. Look for San Diego technology solutions. ESET, Qualcomm, many companies in town that are part of this infrastructure and ecosystem help us develop jobs in San Diego at a time that I think we really need it. I think about my 16-year-old son, my 15-year-old daughter, and where they're going to work. I want it to be in San Diego. I don't want to visit them in Austin or some other place, New Mexico, no offense. But I think we have the opportunity, sort of right here, right now, to establish San Diego as a leading contender for this type of technology. So I'll get off my soapbox. Do we have one or two more questions? Liz just came into the room, so we're under the gun now. Go ahead, sir.
I go to these things, and I've been voicing an opinion that it's time for a national ID card. And every time I say that out loud, people start to attack me, and they say, well, that's... we're invading people's privacy by requiring a national ID card. I'd like to get your ideas and thoughts on.
Well, I think we already have one, right? Which is
national ID card.
Arguably is Social Security. Now, if you sort of take that and put it together with a passport, you've got a pretty comprehensive. And I don't think Social Security is not on a passport, is it? I don't think so. Yeah.
Well, what I'm talking about is something that we actually wear outside.
Oh, I see. Like a physical ID.
Around.
Yeah.
So that way, when you're walking around, and people,
another
particularly
lanyard?
here in San Diego, I get stopped a number of times when I drive very nice cars because they want to know if that's my car.
Understand.
But if I had, if I had a real, an ID card that identified the fact that this is my car, this is who I am, and I actually do belong here, it would be more fair.
Yeah,
so my question is, how do you look at it as far as a national ID card?
National ID?
I actually was looking at someone with a legal background, but also knows how to play politics. So I can tell you from firsthand experience growing up with a family that was active at Woodstock, and I being a product of that I have a mother who would strangle me if I took that argument too far. At the same time, working with the Australian government and a few other governments around the world, that's the real question. And I think what I see is a younger generation that is more open and that sees their opportunities through connection more than necessarily my generation or previous generations. Our ability as Americans to be, very independent and do things our way and keep government away from us needs to somehow be extracted from the debate of your identity in cyberspace. And at the same time, we must remember availability. And I think that there's a natural fear and tension between government being viewed as the confidentiality, integrity, father out there, and my access and my ability to have that availability to drive innovation and creative thinking. And I don't have the answer to that. If I did, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be Bill Gates or something. But we need to bring these discussions to the national stage. We need to stop focusing on just the short-term objectives and see what our forefathers saw when they created the interstate system in the 50s. We need to identify ourselves in a cyber world and our leadership roles and responsibilities in that world. Otherwise, we are going to quickly be, in that world, a third-tier provider or player. But I do think identity and access management is going to be one of those critical drivers, and I look forward to that on the national debate.
And I'll add. I think from a policy perspective, there's sort of two different views, and you can say that there's value for certain people in having that. Maybe other people don't see that value. I think the way our country was founded certainly speaks to the sort of independent streak. I think in the cyber world, though, the irony is what you're seeing develop between Facebook and Google is, the internet before this iteration of it was an anonymous wild, wild west, everyone downloading on Napster, no one knowing who anyone was. And the reality is what Facebook has done, it's interesting that it's a social network, and that's really great for all of us that use it. It is probably the purest form of identity on the internet. And what it has done is they know who you are, and Google knows what you do. And that's why those two are head-to-head, and the advertising model is Google doesn't always know that. They sometimes do. Facebook always knows it because you are logged in as you. And I think, so to some degree, we already have it on the internet if you're a Facebook user. And I think how much information gets passed is a whole different debate. But I think we're further down that path than people might think on the internet.
Also, a few days ago, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, Google announced that they will start developing like a private search engine, and you can make a search engine and it's not logged. And I think that, people is demanding privacy, so that's the problem. People want privacy or still want, so that's a problem you need to solve if you want to think in this kind of solutions.
Terrific. Well, we're going to wrap there. A couple things. I want to thank the sponsors of this event, which includes a company I used to work for, ESET, San Diego Business Journal, Bridgepoint Education, Microsoft, SDG&E, and others who have put their hard-earned dollars behind what it is we're all doing today. And that's about providing you and us with a good facility to be in, to have lunch, to fuel ourselves up, and caring enough to make this a first-class event. Did anybody come to this event here today from further than Argentina, where my brother Sebastian came from? Good. Well, we're going to give Sebastian, in honor of his long travel, the final word. So why don't you close us out?
Ooh, okay. It's difficult.
Unrehearsed.
I will try it. I think Robert made this question during the breakfast. How many of you are IT people? Raise your hands. Okay. Well, it's good. I think that's the key of success in this kind of initiatives everywhere in the world, that we need to share the technical people like me with government, with managers at the companies. I think that's the key of success in each initiative against cyber criminals. Maybe five or 10 years ago, only IT people were working on security. So I think we are making good steps on that, and I think that's the key of success, to share this fight with all the community, but especially the government, the public sector, the private sector, and the universities and education sector. So I think that's the key, and we have to keep working in this way.
Great. Please help me thank Sebastian, Andrew, and Christopher for being here today. Thank you very much.